Hey everyone, welcome to the Endgame Podcast Season 2, where I bet you didn't know what you didn't know. I'm Dr. Ryan Wakeham, successful entrepreneur and your Endgame coach. I'm here to talk to you today about the power of successful habits. So sit back, relax, and tune in to today's episode. Today, we're going to explore a really important topic, which is the idea of developing successful habits and routines and what that means for its outcomes. So let's explore the idea that successful people are simply those that are successful for no reason. That's not how it works. If you were to look at individuals who are notably successful, statistically, they're much more likely to have developed routines and habits that are helping to empower them and driving them to be successful over time. Very few truly successful individuals do so without any notable routines or habits. So these things are really important as we think about how we can be most successful ourselves and our teams. So let's first understand what successful habits look like. And actually, let's take a step back and talk about what defines a habit. And I already used this terminology routine, and they're actually two distinctly different things. So a habit is something that actually requires a cue. It actually requires a trigger for you to perform a habit. A bad example of that, and by bad I mean probably a maladaptive habit, is one where you crave a cigarette immediately following a meal. So that would be an instance of finish the meal. That's your cue. Your reward system, the frontal lobe of your brain derives dopamine from smoking that cigarette. And so you have a cue, you have a craving, you have a response or an action, and then you have the reward. And that's actually the kind of the four stages of what we call a habit. So a habit involves a cue, some sort of trigger. It then involves a craving. So there's some reward that you're craving to have. Then you have the actual response or action. And by the way, that action could be a mental action or a thought action, or that action could be a physical action, some sort of actual movement or process. And then finally, when you complete that thing, then that's when you complete that habit, I should say. That's where you get the reward. And again, the reward could be tangible physical things or objects of sorts, or that reward could be brain related chemistry changes. Again, the release of dopamine in your pleasure center for having completed whatever that habit may be. So before we define what successful habits look like, let's define, or now we've defined what a habit is. That's distinctly different than a routine. A routine, which again is also something known to be very common in individuals who are successful, a routine is something that does not require that cue. It does not require some trigger to enact the next step of craving. So those are the distinct differences between what we call habits and what we call routines. So then we look at what are successful habits or what are successful routines or what are the commonalities in those who for all intents and purposes are found to be successful. What are some common themes of those habits specifically? And so I would tell you, and we've talked about some of these in the past, some of the most common themes of successful habits are ones of having intentionality in your day. And what I mean by that is, again, motion drives emotion. So those who prioritize exercise every morning or every day, again, it doesn't have to be the morning, although, again, statistically, it seems most people who are successful are more likely to work out in the morning or do some sort of exercise in the morning. But prioritizing exercise is part of your daily routine. So exercise, motion drives emotion. That's a really key feature among those who are successful. Another really common key theme around success, or those with successful routines or habits, are those that really are intentional with time. So we've talked a little bit about blocking your time, maybe being a master of your schedule, making sure that, when you go into the week or go into a day, you understand what it is you're asking yourself to do that day. And that does include blocking things that are important to you that are non-work related. So again, that might include actually putting on your calendar the idea of exercise. It might include the idea of putting on your calendar a round of golf, or, again, what are some of those personal things that you really need to do to derive energy or to recharge yourself that you're maybe not putting enough time into, in which you make time for, you will ultimately do, especially if it is a something you desire to do, if it's a habit that brings you a reward or a pleasure. Making sure you hard block it or put it into your calendar in a way that you're more likely to follow that. So it's another really common success or sorry, routine or habit that successful people will often have. Another one we've talked a lot about before is this idea of surrounding yourself with the right people. So a routine might be getting on a call with a mentor or a coach. A routine might be having a board meeting or having a team meeting at certain cadences through the week or the month or the year. And that is a way in which you can put yourself in and around some of the more successful individuals in your life, or that you might be getting coaching from or mentorship from, so that you can mastermind an issue process and be solution oriented, but again, get other viewpoints. There's certainly benefit in having other people, eyes on a situation, a second opinion on a situation, or group of performers or plans or whatever that might mean for you. But surrounding yourself with that, with other really incredible people to help get the outcome you're looking for. You're the people you surround yourself with will absolutely dictate who you develop into over time, as change is inevitable, and then how you kind of shape that change, and again, towards a definition of success, can really be influenced heavily by the people in which you surround yourself with. And that is both, personally and professionally. And, that's, we make that distinction here a lot, and that is that you can be successful or have successes in both, and they are intimately intertwined in a way that if you are surrounding yourself with the right people in your personal life but not in your professional life, or vice versa, you could end up putting yourself in a position of lack of success, or of being uh, unhappy, or not having the right purpose or drive, not having the right habits or routines. So again, who you surround yourself with, both personally and professionally, will impact your success, and the success that comes with the routines and habits you're trying to develop. Other key priorities or key habits or routines that individuals who are successful tend to have. Another one that I've mentioned a little bit here and there, and is this idea that you have to have that most successful individuals have more than one stream of income. And that doesn't mean you can't be wildly successful at this one thing. Just like how your wealth manager likely advises you in your kind of stocks or in your portfolio, is that you don't want to put kind of all your eggs in one basket, right? You want to have diversification of your portfolio. You want to have diversification of your income. So a huge portion of individuals who are successful derive income from more than one, oftentimes at least three different income sources. So as you think about another potential routine or habit, and that is this idea that you want to have diversification of not just your money portfolio, but of your business portfolio too. And think about what I've often thought about is, what are the things that are adjacent to what I'm really good at, right? So as a successful psychiatrist and entrepreneur, what I found is when I venture, way outside of my lane. In fact, in a Harvard business class, the teacher was talking about this idea that a company that builds tables might do could do one of three things. That the table company could buy another table company, and we've talked about mergers and acquisitions, and that would be a very clean, there's as clean as something may be after diligence, but that would be obviously something that could be very easily overcome operationally because a table company knows how to make tables and buys another table company or merges in or acquires one. Then there's this idea of what's kind of adjacent to it, right? So if you were looking to add other income streams, the table company might acquire another table company, but they might also go buy a chairs company, right? So that now you have the set. Now you have, you've gotten really good at building tables, you've acquired some table companies, but guess what? Rather than buying or third party outsourcing your chairs, bringing the chair in house, now you've added to your income stream, right? So that would be a concept to consider, which is, hey, I'm successful at X. What would be the chair's equivalent to that table company? That would be something to be thinking about as you think about what other income streams look like. And the third thing the table company could do is, table company acquires a table company buys or acquires a chair company, table company buys a shower head company, right? That is a complete diversion from kind of core business focus. And in that scenario, you might find that your opportunity costs and the cost of the distraction around that, to try to learn how to do something that is so deviant from what you had done before, might end up costing you more than it's worth, right? Or it might distract you from where you can focus your time and energy to be most successful. So this idea of multiple income streams, up to three or more, but in my experience and what I would certainly coach anyone on is find find the adjacent income streams. Don't be the table company buying the shower heads. At least don't be the table company buying the shower heads as your first venture into a different income stream. So diversify, but diversify within an acceptable amount of risk, and commonality would be a really great way to consider that. Another really important habit or routine that we see in really highly effective individuals is this idea of prioritizing reflection, right? So we've talked a little bit about prioritizing physical movement and exercise and kind of well-being, and we've talked a lot about this with journaling. We've talked a lot about this with some of the other podcasts, which is this idea of reflection's also really important. This doesn't have to be religious by any means. It certainly can be religious or spiritual in nature. Meditation is a really great way to achieve mindfulness and to have that reflection. But anything that allows you to reflect back uh, on your day, on your week, on your year, making the time to have both personal and professional reflection is another incredibly common routine or habit that we see in very successful individuals. Finally, another one that is we see a lot in those who are successful, and again, I see it a lot in my profession and career too, which is this idea of being kind of a lifelong learner, right? A constant student. This idea of uh, kind of never deviating away from having that thirst for knowledge and interest, whether that is reading, reading for pleasure, reading for learning, but kind of always having a drive towards reading and education and learning and expansion. Again, we talk about kind of stretching outside your comfort zone, maybe not with your income streams, but this idea that, as you kind of learn more, you become wiser with time. And the faster you can do that, the more likely you will become successful, right? It's one of those doors you open up that then leads to many other doors opening. So having that thirst for knowledge, being a lifetime learner, goes a really long way in creating successful outcomes. And so the more you kind of learn from your maybe failures or lack of successes is another just reflection point on what a great habit or ritual might want to look like or might be, and then how you learn from that and be better the next time. I know I said finally, but there is actually one more. Actually, I'll say two more things that are really common and super important. One, more broadly, this idea of caring for yourself. And you've heard me say this before as well, which is the best analogy for this I can give is I fly a ton. When you're on a plane, the flight attendant will tell you, before you can put someone else's oxygen mask on, you have to put your own mask on first, right? And that is because you can only be successful, you can only be a CEO, you can only be an entrepreneur, you can only help others if you first help yourself. And so if you don't put your own oxygen mask on first, if you're not caring for yourself first and foremost, your ability to care for others in your work, personal or professional life goes down the drain, right? Drops off dramatically. So make sure you care for yourself. And some of that is inherent in the habits and routines I've talked about already, but some of it's not. And so this idea of health and wellness and kind of purpose and drive and, fill your own tanks up first, fill your own lungs up first with oxygen before you try to do that for someone else. And then finally, and as part of that too, and part of purpose, another thing that we see really commonly among successful people is this idea of giving in order to get, right? Or to giving back. And I don't love giving back because that implies that you gut first. And so really we want to empower individuals to lead with a giving hand, meaning when you're asking for something, you're not asking for it. You're actually giving first, and then the world and karma and manifestation, all the things will come back and give to you with time. So I don't love the terminology giving back. I like the idea of leading with a giving hand, but this idea that giving will eventually lead to getting, but you need to do that altruistically or from a place of love and purpose. And if we truly give rather than asking to get, the world will return that favor in spades. So this idea of making sure that you lead with a giving hand as part of your daily or weekly or yearly habits and rituals. So maintaining those again, as we think about, so there's this idea of what are the habits or rituals you should have or want to prioritize. Then there's this idea of how do you keep it as prioritized, or how do you take something that you might be trying to start up and then make it stick as a habit. And really, the best way to go about that is you think about the psychology of it is the juice has got to be worth the squeeze, right? And so you have to, specifically with habits where, again, structurally we talked about a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. The reward, so by nature, there are four pieces to that. The reward, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. You have to truly want what it is you're rewarding yourself with. If you're motivating yourself to, get on a treadmill, new year, new you, you're going to start working out every day, and you either go 0 to 100. So like you haven't gotten off the couch all Christmas break, and then January 1st, you're going to get up and run a marathon. So again, that's not chunking it down. That's not taking it in pieces. That's an unrealistic goal, right? You're never going to get there, or you're certainly not going to get there easily. Along with that is whatever your reward is for doing it has to be worth it, right? If your reward for getting more physically fit is, you give yourself a Twix at the end of 3 months, the chances are that you're going to, unless you really, really love Twix and you really, really like to wait 3 months, the chances that that behavior will get empowered and rewarded and implemented is minimal to none, right? So two things there. One is make sure that you're taking it in steps, right? So make sure that you're making something that is achievable. Again, your end goal might be all the way down here, but where you start, you're not going to run the marathon on day one. So how do you train yourself, or chunk it down into stages so that you get to the point of being able to run a marathon? And we've talked about this too, but make sure you have a timeline. So it's not just I'm here today and I want to run a marathon at some point in my life. It should be I'm here today and I've signed up for this marathon, and therefore I have this many days to get to this level of capability to be able to do this thing. Oh, and by the way, when I do that thing, I'm going to reward myself with X, which is something that you truly want to have or truly want to feel. And so, as I said, two things: chunking it down into sections that you're capable of achieving in a realistic timeline, and then having a reward where the juice is worth the squeeze. And that includes in the steps leading up to the master event, right? So your habit might be a bunch of small habits that are making progress that you'd want to reward or empower. And then ultimately, kind of the grand finale, where you'd also want to have some notable reward or success that you'd want to have. And so, making sure that you identify what it is you want to do, where it is you want to get to, how much time, be very specific about, what's the timeline to get there, and then how you're going to break that down into sections, and then how you're going to reward that behavior, right? So do not try to start habits or routines that are these grand finales on day one, because you will not get there. In fact, you'll disappoint yourself not getting there, which will do the opposite of rewarding you. It'll detract you, and then you'll never do it. So it kind of has that double edge on it. So make sure that you're being very thoughtful and intentional about how you're going to get there. That's also where reflection comes in, right? So that's where journaling, documentation, like reflection. Hey, last week I was running a 9-minute mile. This week I was able to run an 8.5-minute mile, right? So documentation matters so you can visually see it as well. We know that many people are visual learners, so writing it down, documenting it, memorializing it, and then having it to reflect back on allows you to continue to make progress as well. At the end of the day, if you can identify, and again, I gave you 10, 12 different habits. You might want to, as I just said, you might want to start with one or two. You don't want to, you're not going to start tomorrow and suddenly implement. If you're doing none of these things, you should not start tomorrow and try to implement all 10. So you should come up with a plan as you look at the rest of this year, as you're thinking about how do you get to, remember this idea of compounding interest. How do you change 1% day on day so that you ultimately get to that incredibly compounded interest or goal at the end point? So chunk it down, think about what you're going to implement, what's most important to you now. Take that, put a goal around it, put a strategy behind it, figure out what is the cue, what's the craving, what the response or habit's going to be, and then what is that reward, and how do you make it stepwise in a way that's both achievable and empowering along the way. Think about what these different habits might mean, what these different routines might look like, and think about how you can get to a certain day or time where you will have implemented this successful habit, and then when you're going to start working on the next one. So in conclusion, a couple of highlights here. Highly successful individuals tend to have habits and routines that empower them to be successful. Those tend to be a lot of reflection, tend to be a lot of motion drives emotion, and health and well-being, and again, putting your own oxygen mask on first. It tends to be who you surround yourself with and how you surround yourself with others. And it also tends to be how you use your time and energy and how you manage your time and energy. And then finally, this idea of both giving back, but also being a lifetime learner. Those are all really core important habits that very successful entrepreneurs and individuals, either personally or professionally, will encapsulate as their day to day habit or routines. Thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Ryan Wakeham, successful entrepreneur and your end game coach. I'm here to teach you how to exist today so you can expand tomorrow and create the ultimate end game of your wildest desires. Please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and share. I look forward to talking to you soon.